He kōna ipurangi tēnei nā te reo irirangi o Aotearoa.
Kia ora, nau mai haere mai ki te ao hurihanga. Hello and welcome to Our Changing World. Ko Ellen Rikers tēnei. Hope you're having a lovely summer. This week we have 2 stories for you. First up, we have a story from Victoria University of Wellington student Dan Moskovitz. Dan dives into one of the curlier questions facing our predator-free efforts here in Aotearoa. What do we do about mice?
Predator-free 2050. It's an ambitious goal, and one that's easy to love, seeking to eradicate stoats, possums, ferrets, weasels, and rats. Predator-free 2050 has galvanized community conservation groups like nothing before. This has seen some wonderful successes, such as the Jewel of Predator-free, the Marae Peninsula, which, in late 2023, declared that it had eliminated predators. As a policy, predator-free is broadly popular. However, one of the groups criticizing the policy maybe isn't one you'd expect. Ecologists. Stephen Hartley is an associate professor of ecology at Victoria University of Wellington, and as part of his Peoples, Cities and Nature project has been monitoring both mammals and invertebrates on the peninsula since 2018.
The really interesting and cool result we've found is that about 6 months after the rat eradication began, the number of weta in a weta motel in Miramar doubled compared to the rest of Wellington. So we saw what we're ascribing to the fact that there's less predation of tree weta by the reduction in rats and the reduction in mice that happened at the same time, allowed the weta population to really increase on Miramar Peninsula.
What Stephen is describing is results of the elimination of rats on the Miramar Peninsula. But these elimination attempts may have a darker side. To explain, consider the name Predator-Free 2050. Really, it's a misnomer. There are invasive predators who it doesn't target, such as hedgehogs, wasps, cats, and the topic of today, mice. Mice have proven problematic for predator-free. They breed like, well, mice. And to make matters worse, they are nigh on impossible to eliminate. New Zealand's fenced pest-free sanctuaries, like Zealandia, all have mice in them. The result is a potentially dark cloud on Miramar's horizon.
Just starting to find in the last 6 to 12 months that the number of mice looks like it's increasing on Miramar Peninsula, possibly because the amount of rodent control has been scaled down because there's virtually no rats there at all. That's still to be confirmed. It's not an unsurprising result. It's happened on islands before, or after 1080 operations when the rats get knocked down, the mice can bounce back quickest.
In so-called normal times, rats and mice will be competing for the same food in the same space, and a trap can kill a mouse or a rat just as easily, but as mice are smaller and have smaller ranges, the level of effort needed to eliminate mice is a lot more than if you were just eliminating rats. So when the rats are gone, the level of pest control reduces and the mice can balloon to levels much higher than they were at before. This can have detrimental impacts. As omnivores, mice are both a predator of and a competitor with native species, and this has seen them be problematic for native lizards and invertebrates.
Ecologically, the problem is that getting rid of competitors and predators of mice, the result could be mice that are larger in size, larger in populations, and these could eventually cancel out any benefits gained from a rat eradication, for example.
That's the voice of Dr. Araceli Samaniego, who up until recently was a researcher at Manaki Whenua Land Care Research and the author of a piece looking at the impacts of mice.
And then you have the cascading effects of, for example, growing mice populations would mean more feral cats. And we know that that is a problem. The cat problem is already big. It is questionable the net benefit gain from targeting only a few species. When the problem is more complex, you should be attacking all of the causes to really achieve restoration, not a fraction of them.
A study done in Auckland's Tawharanui Sanctuary showed some, but not conclusive evidence of mice getting larger within. Similarly, without competitors, mice populations can explode, going from 50 a hectare in the presence of competitors to 150 a hectare in the sanctuaries, while on offshore islands where other mammals have been eradicated, this can go above 1,000. So with all these impacts, why were mice not part of predator-free in the first place? That's a question I asked to Brent Bevan, the current head of Predator-Free 2050 at the Department of Conservation.
For two reasons. One, they weren't coming through as a core predator, even sort of 7 years ago. So they were predominantly thought of at that point in time as a seed eater, seeds and invertebrates. And the impact they're starting to have on lizards and some evidence on island situations of them eating birds and that is relatively recent.
What about their impact on invertebrate populations?
The invertebrates cycle through really quickly, so they're driving mice numbers along with seed as opposed to the other way around. So there wasn't much evidence that we were getting extinction series events through mice predation on invertebrates, which is what we were getting with a lot of our bird species. And the other factor at play was there was a consideration not only of impact, but how far down the line of achieving eradication were we? So was this feasible or not? And 7 years ago, mice were just thought absolutely impossible, so they weren't included.
Mice eradications are really hard. New Zealand has done it just twice before, in the sub-Antarctic Antipodes and at Rangitoto-Motutapu Island, which is just off the coast of Auckland. But as Bevan explains, both times were exceedingly difficult.
It's got to be almost perfect in its application. So we do look at overlapping bait lines. There's a lot of science behind how we do it, and a lot of application of GIS work, very sophisticated helicopter navigation gear, because you cannot leave a gap. If you leave a gap with mice, and you don't expose every mouse to a bait, they don't have huge ranges. So even a 10-metre wide gap might be enough for a small population of mice to survive. And then the whole effort's been wasted at that point.
The thing is, it's a lot cheaper to eradicate both mice and rats simultaneously. In her 2024 paper, Dr. Samaniego goes into the eradication at Rangitoto-Motutapu, where it was pointed out that an eradication of rats followed by a mice eradication would have cost about 77% more. So where does this leave mice and predator-free? Bevan assured me that mice are still part of the plan, but their role is not super clearly defined. Where things might get tested is the sub-Antarctic Auckland Islands. There, Doc is seeking to eradicate feral cats, pigs, and mice in a simultaneous operation. At 570 squared kilometres, if successful, the project would be the largest ever mice eradication by about 4 times, and could aid predator-free in learning about how to eradicate mice in the future. Back to where our story began on the Marae Peninsula. As we learned earlier, the intensity of trapping has lightened now that rats have been eliminated, with the focus now on fighting back any incursion of rats or targeted pests. So what happens next will be a good opportunity to learn what a mice resurgence could do on a predator-free peninsula. As Stephen Hartley explains, it's complicated.
If it's rodent predation that was keeping the invertebrate numbers down, you take away the rodents, the invertebrates should increase. But remembering the invertebrates are also food for birds, and some of the birds may have been suppressed because of rat predation of their nests and their chicks. Without rats, there could be more birds, and with more birds, you might then get a reduction of insects. So maybe it's been a temporary surge in weta and other invertebrates, and then now things higher up the food chain, like mice and hedgehogs and birds, are probably benefiting from the extra invertebrates around.
Even if we do have a mice surge at the cost of eradicating possums, stoats, weasels, ferrets, and rats, is that not still better? Or, even if predator-free turns out to be completely unattainable, isn't still having better suppression and more research into controlling these invasive pests still better? This is where perspectives diverge, and the science is murky. There is evidence to suggest that the mice are getting bigger in our fenced sanctuaries. Then again, it's also fair to say the native biodiversity in those sanctuaries are doing pretty good. Perhaps mice have already caused all the invertebrate and lizard extinctions that they were going to. But that's borderline unknowable. And is this predator-free thing even achievable anyway? One potential way to think about predator-free is that it is a way of buying time. While DOC does its research into better methods of elimination, local trapping efforts can suppress predators in the interim.
What we're in at the moment is the development phase. So we've just had license to explore and learn and create a whole lot of new tools, technologies, abilities to do work. So it's an investment in really broadening the toolbox to help us manage these threatening processes, predators, which will take us towards thriving Indigenous wildlife. So, it's a really positive space. Even if we got to 2030 or 2040 and we said, well, look, it's just impossible, it's way beyond our capability, we're still going to have more tools and better tools and a better ability to manage these predators across bigger areas for the same amount of money. So it's just that there is no loss to our investment in predator-free at the moment.
Stephen Hartley sits somewhere in the middle regarding predator-free, so I asked him his thoughts on it and whether mice should be added.
It was already a hugely ambitious goal, and to say that you want to completely eradicate mice would be even harder, probably. I think there will be a nuancing of the goals and the aims as time goes on now that we've learned a lot from the different projects that are undergoing at the moment. But at some point, I think there'll be places where they decide, actually, we need to include these other mammals in this particular area to get the really good biodiversity gains. We also need to control mice and hedgehogs, as well as the rats and the possums and the mustelids. And there might be other places where they decide, actually, here, all we need to do is focus on stoat control. So Capital Kiwi is an example where they've released kiwi in west of Wellington into the Marae Hills, and that's been made possible primarily because of stoat control. So depending on your conservation goal, you don't always have to eliminate everything or eradicate everything. You can suppress certain key predators to a low enough level, and that will allow a particular conservation goal or outcome, such as the reintroduction of kiwi. But it doesn't necessarily allow the flourishing of every insect and lizard that could be in those hills west of Wellington.
This could be the most realistic future of predator-free regarding not just mice, but also everything. It could all depend on the biodiversity of an area and what needs protecting. The data where we do nothing is clear. We will continue to lose taonga species. The data where we do something is a lot murkier.
That was Dan Moskovitz with a story created as part of his coursework at the School for Science and Society at Victoria University of Wellington, with music from sound designer B. Wood. Dan spoke to Associate Professor Stephen Hartley, also from Victoria University of Wellington, Dr. Araceli Samaniego, and Brent Bevan from the Department of Conservation. Next up, a story from Catch On, a mini podcast created by Xanthe Smith. Many people who eat fish often stick to the fillets, and this means that other parts of the fish, like the heads and the frames, often just get chucked, even though they're just as tasty and nutritious. We join Xanthe to learn about a project tackling this food waste by connecting communities in need with kaimoana.
I saw a stat the other day that the average New Zealand household throws away about $900 worth of perfectly good food every single year. That's a monumental amount, and I want to learn more about how we can avoid doing this. That's why I'm waiting outside the fish market to meet a man called Jupp. He's the Wellington lead for a project called Kaika. Kaika is an idea for how we can use more of the fish that we catch. Here's how it works. Usually, commercially caught fish is sent to a factory, the fillets are cut away, and then the rest of the fish is binned. Chris's job is to drive around Wellington in his van, pick up all of the fish that isn't being used by these factories, and then send off in a new direction. Chris rolls up in the Kaika van. It's basically a fish fridge on wheels. Once I've clambered inside, we drive off towards the first pickup location. After a bit of driving, we reach Cannons Creek. We pull into a car park in the centre of the suburb, and Chris rolls open the doors and starts to set things up. I put a pair of gloves on and wait for the first people to come and collect their fish. People arrive with ice cream containers and plastic bags, and my job is to help them find the fish that they want in the back of the van.
There you go, there's snapper there. Nice. Some hapaka collars. Yeah, please. Oh, no.
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh, that's a good fry up.
Oh, yeah.
can you fry the collars?
Oh, I do. I deep fry my Yeah.
Oh, look at that one. I noticed that snapper heads were particularly popular.
Yes, please. Yeah, that's a
Whoa.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you. That's plenty kai for everyone. Awesome.
Do you want me to help you put it in your car?
Oh, yes, please.
Sure, brother. Be well, man.
Some weeks they have kinner, in which case everyone goes nuts and really wants that instead. And today there were a couple of kingfish, which we had to dig for, because as soon as people hear there's kingfish, it's like, that is the one. I want that for my meal. It just tastes really good. Kaika is about more than tasty food. It's about conservation. Here's Chris Jupp explaining the idea behind it.
What became really clear is that what some people view as waste, others view as delicacy. When I was growing up and we caught fish, heads and frames, straight in the bin. I talked to so many people, in fact the majority of people that I talk to about this can't believe that I did that, because they know actually the heads and frames are some of the best parts of a fish. The nutrient dense, there's heaps of meat, and the cultural significance, particularly for Marae and Pacifica, the cultural significance is immense. And so when we started to say, well, rather than these parts of the fish going into waste streams, let's get them to people who will love them, that came about in partnership with Legacy, the Outboard Motor Club in Auckland, and Papatūānuku Kokiri Marae. And that came about just before COVID hit.
During the peak of COVID, Kaika was distributing about 2 tonnes of fish heads and frames every single week. That's the same weight as a small aircraft. Imagine that divided into bins of fish.
So 2 tonnes of fish heads and frames is enough for over 5,500 single serves. But if we think about that in terms of family dinners, that's about 1,120 families sitting down to a family meal of nutritious meat-based protein.
Wow.
And the thing about kaimoana is if people like it, they love it. That is a dinner table that is full of joy and full of gratitude. What we saw really quickly is that the current economic climate we're living in, people are really hungry. Buying fish or kaimoana from a supermarket is inaccessible because it's so much. You want to buy snapper fillets at the supermarket, they're $54 a kilo. So then the heads and frames of those very same fish, which are viewed as the best parts of those fish to many people, were going to waste. Now they're being gifted freely to people to enjoy. So really clear we could see that not only was this a conservation thing, but this had massive social value in terms of addressing food insecurity.
Can you tell me more about where did Kaika start and how did it find its way down to Wellington?
Papatūānuku Kokiri Marae, based in South Auckland. Their community engagement is incredible. A member of New Zealand Sports Fishing Council knew of this marae, but also saw the amount of heads and frames that were going to waste at the local boat ramp. So he turned up one day and said, what if we started gifting you these heads and frames? And so this partnership was born. 385,000 plus kilos later, the Kaika project is slowly but surely creeping across the country.
Even though Kaika operates on a model of giving things away, it still needs money to run.
The Kaika project is funded by grants from philanthropic providers in part. For example, here in Wellington, that includes Wellington City Council. As part of their waste minimisation objectives, they've invested in the Kaika project here, which is amazing. We've got a number of local businesses that support Legacy and the Kaika project across the country. But what we've seen is that for us to be able to front up week after week to follow through on our commitments to provide this kaimoana in communities who really need access to it, we need to be financially sustainable. And so we've been working hard to find ways that we can build an economic model into what we're doing. And one of the key parts of that is fish filleting. So it's a beautiful day on Saturday. The guys go out on the boat, catch a whole bunch of fish. They've had an awesome day. They get back off the water. They're tired. They've got to wash down the boat and they've got a bin full of fish. They don't want to have to cut those fish. But if the Kaika project is there for a small fee, we fillet their fish, we give them back professionally cut fillets, and we take the heads and frames that they don't want off their hands, put them on ice and get them directly to local families in their community who will appreciate them. They love it. And so for us, that is sustaining the project, but it's also creating jobs.
There are a few key steps that Kaika needs to follow in order to set up in a community.
So the first thing is when we look to begin supplying in a community, we do that in partnership with an organisation, grassroots, already working on the ground who have those relationships. We don't want to create something new, we want to contribute to the awesome that's already happening. And so we partner with those community organisations, and through those relationships, that's how we can reach people who really need access to that kaimoana. Then the invitation is there for anyone and everyone to turn up.
Another way to think about what Chris is saying is that if Kaika were to just show up without telling anyone and start trying to hand fish out, you probably wouldn't see a very positive response. In fact, I think most people would be wildly confused by the whole thing. That's why you need someone who can connect you to the community. For Naenae and Upper Hutt, that connection is Vera, who I met while handing out fish.
Ko Vera toko ingoa. I am the kaimahi for Kokiri Marae Naenae Hub. I have been here for 2 years, and how I met Chris was through Kirsten, who was part of our Kai collective that we had going here with the other food banks. So meeting Chris was a godsend to our whānau for the community. Reason being is, one, they never get fish because it's quite expensive, and I've gone out to shops to have a look how much they are. It's normally about $8 for a fish head. So for us to have the opportunity for Chris to come out and deliver fresh fish heads and frames, and it's absolute fresh, it is amazing. He came out here, and because he wasn't too sure, I wasn't too sure how we were going to go. He was here, and I think in maybe 14 minutes, we had gone through 7 bins.
Wow, that's a lot of fish.
It's a lot of fish. People were amazed, and they just couldn't believe it, the fact that here is this van pulling up fresh fish heads and frames. And then they thought it was a one-off. No, this is going to be every week, pending weather, of course. That guy that you saw that came, and he sort of looked, and he goes, and then that's why I say, do you want some fish? And he goes, I said, it's free. And he goes, is it? So it's that shock, like, oh my gosh, it's free fish. Yes, please. And then they look at you again and they go, I'm not too sure how many they can have, whatever the amount is. And that's what's so great about Chris. Whatever the amount is, it's for your whānau, it's all good.
What sort of meals do you reckon people are making out of these fish heads and frames?
Straight up boiled with coconut cream, because Pacific Islanders love just boil, cut the heads, clean it, boil it up. Roast, baking. So what I did, there was a couple of whānau that had come and they didn't know what you do with fish heads, and so I did a demonstration.
Did you?
I did a demonstration, and so we got the fish on the Thursday, and then Friday I said, if you want to come in, we're going to have a demonstration. So I boiled some fish, I baked some with veggies. To me, it's all about colour, and put veggies in it, and then, presented it. And people were like, wow, is that how we do it? I said, that it's as simple as that.
After a full day talking to people about their fish recipes, I couldn't walk away without trying something myself. So I went home and I made some fish head soup for my flatmates. Specifically, we wanted to try the fish eyes because I've heard that those are really, really good for you. Reactions were mixed. Go for it, Tom. What did you think?
I really enjoyed the fish head soup, and I think it's something that I might make again.
Well, I thought it was a very yummy soup, and I enjoyed the fish that was just like normal fish. But when I got the surprise eye in my mouth and this completely different texture, that was quite shocking. But it was still yummy.
So, reduce fish waste and tasty food. Chris Jupp says it's a project that everyone is happy to get on board with.
The other incredible thing that quickly became apparent with the Kaika project is that it's a win-win for everybody involved. It's been described to me as like selling ice creams on a hot day. And interestingly enough, it's one of the few projects that I have seen that has been able to bring a whole bunch of stakeholders together who otherwise would often find it difficult to come together. We're talking about local businesses, local community grassroots organisations. We're talking about commercial fishermen. We're talking about non-commercial fishermen. We're talking about local iwi. We're talking about this vast net of people who can come together around the simple idea that if we show maximum respect and maximum utilisation to the fish we take from our oceans, that is a good thing for everybody. I love the stories of young people who turn up and say, I don't know how to cook this stuff, but my nan can't get out of her house and she loves this stuff. So I'm going to collect the whole bunch, I'm going to take it home to nan, I'm going to take it home to koro, we're going to share it there and we're all going to enjoy a kai together.
That was a story from Xanthe Smith, produced as part of her internship at the Office of the Prime Minister's Chief Science Advisor. Xanthe spoke to Chris Jupp from Kai Ika and Vera from Kokiri Marae Naenae Hub. This episode was assembled by me, Ellen Rikers, with help from our Changing World presenter Claire Concannon. Sound engineering was by William Saunders. I'm Ellen Rikers. Thanks so much for listening. Have a great week. Kia pai te wiki.